hearing and all of that is when you use the word practice, I think of that all the time. And what do I need to practice today? What do I need to continually sustain not only my recovery, my wellness? We were talking about mental health awareness month and how all of those things come together, even with multiple years of recovery, right? I had shared in a video that I surprisingly got a huge amount of views, and it was around I knew all these things, but still I fell into this dark place in my recovery that was, yeah, it was very dark. And we know what we know, but unless we're practicing it, yes, sharing it with someone as a peer coach is great when we do trainings. But if we're not filling our own cup, if we're not practicing the things that we preach, or at least we put out there, we end up in a silo. And that
Yeah.
was the question I was going to come into next: is why do recovery systems still struggle with silos and division? We in recovery struggle with that, but why did systems struggle with that? What do you think?
We've been talking about it actually in Virginia right now. A bunch of us have been working on a group in several different places that we're calling One Voice Virginia, or One Voice for Recovery for Virginia. And
Okay.
part of it's breaking down silos. Part of it's realizing that people in different silos have stuff in common. I'll give you an example in a second, but but the primary reason I think is that federal grant money is still split in silos.
Uh-huh.
There's the 2 block grants are for mental health and substance use.
Yeah.
And they're, roughly, well, who God only knows what they're going to be next year. But I mean, they're 2 totally separate grants. And so agencies have, historically, um, I think that's part of it. They have kept themselves split in pieces. I was one of my fellow students. I think she's in Illinois. They still have 2 totally separate agencies for substance use and mental health stuff.
They
If I
used to.
if I'm if I'm
In
remembering
Connecticut, they
correctly,
used to.
Virginia merged them in the 70s.
Yeah.
'Cause I had to write that up for something.
These are 80s here in Connecticut. I'm not sure.
But, I was, and this whole thing, I was trying to bring in people because I have a family connection to the autism community. Um, and, for example, we've been working on barrier crimes in Virginia for years now. Virginia has, by over 100, the longest list of barrier crimes to employment in licensed facilities than any other state in the country. And it's all racially based. It all goes back to the 1900s and so on. Um, but we have a huge amount in common with the autism community and the IDDD community, because so many of those kids and adults too, for that matter, have Medicaid waivers, which means a family member can work and get paid as their caregiver. Um, Unless they have a barrier crime. They're living in the goddamn house with the person,
Right.
and they can't get hired to work for them because they have a barrier crime. And so, and of course it affects peers because so many peers have different charges from way back.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we're making little snippets of progress, but also, and I wrote my first piece of legislation I'm going to try and get introduced this coming fall, where when I was still working at the state hospital, we hired a small number of people to work in the kitchen, work in maintenance, and so on as, full employees, part-time, to, practice employment skills. And they got hired by human resources, went through everything. Well, there was one person who got hired to work in the kitchen. And 3 days after they started, HR said, sorry, you have a barrier crime. We have to terminate you. This person lived in the hospital 24/7.
Uh-huh.
They were going to be there for a number of different reasons for at least a couple of years. And they literally could get food on one side of the counter they could not serve food from 3 feet away on the other side of the counter because of the charge they had. And when I told that to 2 representatives, "You gotta do something about that. You get us a bill, we'll do something about that." But that's how ridiculous this stuff is. This
This is
person
the
is,
thing
you know.
with Sean Hampton, with Recovery Workspace. I know there's been many different models, but when I was in Vegas, we were just well, they were already involved in the recovery workspace,
They've been doing tons of stuff.
and I think Hilton hotels were
Yeah,
because, again, you got Vegas, you got mostly, hospitality,
yep,
positions out there, but, their recovery workplace system is just growing leaps and bounds,
yep,
and it's because they're very plugged in with their state representatives and the organizations, the companies themselves.
yep,
They have to take a training to learn more about what addiction is, what recovery is, what how important it is to provide this safe space for people in recovery. We're voters and we're great workers, but the stigma hanging over our head,
well,
and
well,
we didn't have a whole lot of advocates until a lot of us
yep.
got out there, hit the streets, knocked on doors, shared our lived experience, and said, "This isn't right. People shouldn't be living under the bridge." And when they were released from the in psychiatric
Yeah,
hospitals, right? We
yeah,
need
and they were
to
kicked
provide
out by the thousands.
right, and we need to provide a safe space for people so that they can live and thrive. And I that's what really brought me into the advocacy work, but more and working with teenagers because in my town here in Milford, uh, was it the little city with a big heart, we had an epidemic of overdose, especially our young people in high school or independent school for the troubled kids.
They call it reform school.
And so that's what really brought me into, the recovery movement and also seeing the documentary, The Anonymous People, and
Yep,
then Generation Found by Greg Williams.
yep.
And then I didn't meet Ryan until 2019 in person. He and I had been friends on Facebook and social media. But that first time that we met in Vegas, 2019, 250 of us in a ballroom there in Las Vegas at the Westgate, and we're representing 50 states, which was great. But what I didn't see sitting in the back of the room was there wasn't a lot of people that were representing us, representing, or at least, not just the LGBTQ plus community, which there were several of us there, but also people of color.
Oh,
And
yeah, it was very white crowd.
it was, there was less than a handful. One of them was a main speaker, Dr. Eddie Moore, which, he was like through, I was like, whoa, like I was back in the room and hearing him speak and talking about white privilege. I was like, wow, had never heard someone talk about that. It's with so much passion and so much drive to wanting to make change. And that's what we are. We're change agents. And we're in this leadership role, whether we like it or not. We've kind of been pushed into these spaces because I really think that it is our divine calling. It's in our blood. It's in our DNA.
Yep. And I think, it's interesting because the VCU conference I was at, I think it was 350 people there plus another umpteen hundred online. And it was probably half people of color, and it was noticeable by its presence, not noticeable by its absence, if you know what I mean. That it was like, "Wow, this looks like Richmond. This looks like Virginia. This looks like reality," you know? Uh, um Still, interestingly enough, of course, very few people with different physical, challenges and so on. That's still something
Which we
that
also we
the
recognize when
yeah.
you talked about autism. I just recently found out someone very close to me, that they've been diagnosed with autism. But this is the thing, it's just like addiction, it's not a death sentence,
No.
it's educating, it is finding ways, it means we just learn different, right? We
Yep.
obtain things, so it's about finding what works for them, meeting them where they're at, providing those, conversations that are very uncomfortable, but
You
also leading the way to there is a way. There is a
you know
way to recovery.
it's interesting because part of the mutual well-being group I did a week ago, I did a little tiny 3 or 4-minute thing on language, and, the whole if I can get this is what I used to say at the hospital, if I can get 80% of the clinical staff at the hospital to say a person with something as opposed to a borderline, a schizophrenic,
Right.
whatever, and I said person with autism, person with whatever. And
Mm,
somebody pointed out, interestingly enough, that and I didn't know this, there's a movement within the autism community to actually not do that, that some people's preference is to be called autistic as opposed to a person with autism.
interesting.
Uh, yeah. And it's like, okay, that's
I
your
got called
choice.
out for
Fine.
saying,
You,
"Oh,
you
are
tell
you"
me.
asking someone, "Are you autistic?"
Yeah, so
So
just
I'll
tell
have
me
to go
what you
back
wanna
to
be
my
tell me what you
supervisor.
wanna be called. But we have to ask. That's
And
the
I
big
hear
thing.
that,
We have to
also
ask.
too, not wanting to use person of color. I would say because I'm biracial, I would be, well, I'm half black and half white. No,
Right,
you're black and white. It's
right,
not half and half.
right. You don't have this there
There's
is
not
no
2
line down
quarters.
the
I'm not split,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
The other thing is that, people that are African American, right, or say that they're African American because
yeah.
that's the box they get to check. I remember the day where there wasn't all those boxes, and my mother would say, "Check other," and then put mulatto. It was
Yep,
like,
there's another one of those
don't
words that
use
I
that
haven't
word
heard in
anymore.
yeah,
So I think it is a preference, right? Even when we're addressing someone with, yeah, as folks could see that Tom and I use pronouns. I remember Chantel also saying, well, no, we don't, or hearing someone say, we don't ask if it's a preferred. How would you like to be addressed? What are your pronouns? Things
yeah,
are changing so quickly in all spaces, in all different cultures, in all different
yeah.
divisions, and
There
which within those divisions, within those silos, there is also the argument: what is the best way? And I always go back to that: meeting me where I'm at. Ask if you don't know,
ask.
just ask.
Yep. I learned 2 or 3 sort of connected things. I'll see if I can remember all of them by the time I go through them. But I use my pronouns primarily because of her and a couple of other people.
Right.
Personally, I could care less. But I know it's important to people that I care about.
Mhm.
And so I do it for them.
Right.
The ones that are alive and even more so to honor the ones that aren't. By the way, when I was in Richmond the first day I was there, I had a T-shirt that somebody had made. Somebody I met at one of the SAMHSA conferences. There was a quote of hers um, that said something like, "It's not just resilience; it's survival."
Mhm.
And so I wore that when I did the panel. I did. Um, but I've read surveys and stuff that say that most people of Latin heritage, if you ask them if they want to be called Latinx, they say, "What the hell is that?" No,
Yeah.
they have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
And so, it was some of these things are sort of made
Of
up
folks with an
in
X.
acad
I
yeah,
got that from Jim Wolfe. It's already non-binary.
yeah. And right. And so again, it's the other thing I learned, and this was when I was working at the crisis stabilization unit for 6 years. And Chantel taught me this too, is when somebody's in crisis, it's not their job to teach me their culture.
There,
It's
yes,
my it's
remember
my
that.
job it's my
Powerful.
job to learn the
That is
basics. It's
yeah,
their job it's my job to ask them how they relate to their culture,
yeah,
because that can be, in some cases, the cause of their distress,
exactly.
especially if you're
They're
dealing
maybe
with
far removed
generational
from it due to their addiction or
well,
family trauma.
And generational stuff,
Generational.
where,
Yep.
they wanna the person is young, and I worked with a lot of UVA students, they wanna go do this, they wanna go do that. Well, they're 2nd generation, 3rd generation from wherever, and that, I mean, it's just not done, and the family tension and the depression and the anxiety and the stress and everything else related to that, again, is, yeah, it's a cause of substance use, it's a cause of separation, it's a cause of anxiety and so on. But it's my job to understand that, at least in that culture, that can be a big issue.
Ugh,
And then to ask them, is this an issue for you?
right. Right.
And the only time
Ugh,
the the only time I ever really told people things, I ended up somehow and working with lots of young people from, mostly from UVA, who came from conservative religious families who were dealing with coming out, either asking themselves, still questioning themselves, or they've already questioned themselves and they've come up with the answer. um, and so, I was working with one person once, and we had a family meeting, and of course they weren't ready to bring that up and so on. And the parents said, will you sign a release so, the family doctor can get the medical records? And of course, because the person's primary stressor was their questioning and accepting and so on, at least a piece of that had to be in their record because it's why they were there. It
right.
wasn't, we couldn't lie about it. We very much made it very general and so on, but it had to be in there. And so after the parents left, I said, "How well do your parents know your doctor? They go to the same church. They go to the same country club." I said, "What do you think the chance of whatever is in your records, whatever is in there, what do you think the chance of your doctor telling your parents?" And the person said, "I never thought about that. It's 100%."
Yeah.
I said, "Don't sign the release because you know that the doctor is gonna,
Uh,
and so on. And if you're not ready to have that happen, then be careful." But other than that, I almost never gave advice. It was just
yeah.
asking people, how does this all fit in with your culture and so on. And it was interesting because my chapter in my ethics book this week is on religion and spirituality and so on. And, I worked at one point about 45 minutes from Jerry Falwell's original church in Lynchburg. And I had a couple of peers that I trained as peer specialists who were sort of one step removed from there. And they have a bunch of programs for family members struggling with all different kinds of things. And and this is somebody who literally said in the early 80s, I should be dead, that I deserved whatever, we all deserved whatever happened to us and that we'd all be better off dead. But that program that they ran at that church was the absolute perfect program for a coworker who, at a staff lunch, pulled me aside and said, "This is what I'm struggling with. I've got a family member," and I knew person of very strong faith. I thought that's where I'm going to refer her.
Okay.
You know, it was the right place for her. You know, if I got within 3 miles of it, the alarms would go off probably, but, based on who I am and what I believe, but it was the absolute perfect program for her. And so I said, "Here," you know,
Love that.
and so, it's learning, it's just asking people and making the connections, even if it's stuff
Even
that
if it's
we
uncomfortable. And I
Oh,
think that's
this is
yeah,
way past uncomfortable. I
yeah,
mean,
I
this
think
was
that's where we get stuck, is that asking versus assuming. It's uncomfortable either way, so just pull off the freaking Band-Aid and just go
Yep.
for it, and there's always those 2 words, "I'm sorry." There's
Mhm.
always that, I apologize, I
Yeah.
got it wrong." I heard this during COVID from Justin Michael. He used the term calling people forward.
Mhm.
Granted, people need to be called out. They need to,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. This administration, you need to be calling them out 24/7. Call your legislation. Get the person out.
Some
But
on
let me just
Facebook.
finish, let me just finish.
Yeah.
And course, we're starting to wrap things up too
Okay.
as well. But, just so hold that thought. But calling people forward, yes, allows them to that sense of safety, allows me that sense of safety that not the sense I can control the narrative, that I am very interested in what you have to share, but it is also that sense of respect, right? And providing that those safe, healthy boundaries without judging the person or pointing the finger and things like that. But like I said,
Yeah.
yeah, people definitely need to be called out. If you wanna just tap in and, share what you were just gonna share, and then I'm gonna
Yeah.
wrap this up with a couple questions
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. Somebody had a thing on Facebook this morning that I saved that scrolled up a list of everything that has been either smash challenged or taken away since January 20th of last year.
yeah.
And my comment was, how are we ever going to even start getting some of this back? And what it dawned on me was, one of my highly respected people is Pete Buttigieg, who has said numerous times, we don't need to get it back. We need to rebuild it better. That it wasn't all that great. It wasn't all that great before it got destroyed. And so when we build it back, let's really focus on building it back in a way that works and works better. I mean, that's where, Hanera a couple of years ago, remember in DC said, the system isn't broken.
Yeah.
It's working exactly the way
Way
it
it's
was
supposed
designed
to.
to work,
Absolutely, it was
you know?
designed. It was
Yep,
designed. That's what Project 2025 is all about, right? And
yep,
they're building a Project 2028. It's built exactly as it was designed, but it also had been pulling information from both your and our history,
yeah,
right?
and
They've been using the same techniques, the same conversations, even the same language and kinda distorted it definitely distorted in different ways to fit their means, against us. And so that's where I am a registered Democrat, but I'm like, we need to get our shit together
yep,
and stop being so nice."
yep, yep. It's about power.
Yeah,
It's about power, and somehow we have this idea that, if we're gonna be progressive, liberal, whatever you wanna call it,
mhm,
that power somehow it's what the other folks do.
yeah,
Well, my parents were, of course, the FDR generation, and he definitely knew how to wield power,
yeah,
and somehow in there, it got lost.
mhm.
That it's,
I think in every administration, something got lost because even in the Obama administration, a lot of things got lost. We had blinders on. We were looking at the first Black president and
yeah,
looking for a miracle, and the
yeah.
thing is that and this goes kind of back around into our own personal recovery. Yes, you can have all the information out there in front of you, but the bottom line, the work has to be done here.
Well, it's
That's
interesting.
it's an inside job.
It's interesting because people have been posting this on Facebook recently about people sharing political stuff in recovery meetings. And what my take on it is, and it's what I do, and it's what if anybody asks, I'll say, well, this is what I do is I'm not gonna talk about what happened,
Mhm.
but I am gonna talk about my reaction to it.
Right,
Because my reaction to something is something that in some cases threatens my recovery.
right.
And
It's
that I
personal.
need to
It's
that I need to
personal.
talk about. But I'm talking about how it affects me,
Right,
not the fact that I'm furious about it,
right.
or that,
I always hated, "Well, everybody feels" no,
no,
don't speak for me.
Yep.
I had to deal with that through again, with my mom and, being hiding behind her whiteness, which Resmaa Menakem was able to help me push past that and
I
say,
remember
"Hey,
that.
girl, baby girl,
Yeah.
you are not broken." And that's what I felt. I felt like I was this person that needed to hide so the other people would see her first and then accept me.
Yeah. And it's interesting because some of the EMDR work, some of the therapy work I'm doing is on bullying and so on, from when I was pretty young, and so it's there's some parallels, there's some overlap there.
Yeah. So as we wrap it up, we once a month I do leadership on the edge, which is another kind of an extension with transformation on the edge, cruising on the edge. I'm just keep piecing things together as I'm building this podcast. And I want to thank you so much for everything that you shared. But just one question, and then I'll put out some reflection questions for our audience to, maybe just look at what was said in this podcast or in their own personal lives. But for someone listening right now, and wants to get involved in advocacy work or wants to use their lived experience, whether they're a person,
Yeah.
uh, in recovery from addiction or a family member or a friend or an ally, what would be some steps that, maybe one or two steps or three steps that you would recommend for them to get started?
Find a group of people that are doing something you relate to, that have a similar outlook. The mobilizerecovery.org,
There you go.
is one place,
There's your
but it
plug,
could be
Brian. We're waiting for
whatever
our
your
check.
whatever your issue is.
Yeah.
And it might not even have necessarily anything to do with recovery per se. If you're working, if you are connected to the autism community. I mean, I was Googling this for something else. There's 3 or 4 different autism organizations in Virginia, and they do different things and they have different outlooks on things. One of those may resonate with you. There's the, classic NAMI Mental Health America collection of people. And so on. I mean, there's all different kinds of groups. But connect is
That
the single
connection,
biggest
yep.
thing.
Mhm.
There's that saying, only connect. I can't remember who said it, some famous philosopher or something. But it goes back to what Johann Hari's book was about, and
The
that
opposite
the
of addiction
opposite,
is recovery,
it's connection. Yeah.
is connection.
And, yeah, because and it goes back to the mutual well-being thing that I was doing a couple of weeks ago that Heather and I cooked up a few years ago. We can't do this alone. That's why whenever anybody says self-care, I wanna scream these days, because we can't do this alone. I mean, we can practice self-care skills,
Mhm.
but we can't do it by ourselves. We absolutely can't do it by ourselves. And because that tidal wave that we're facing is just overwhelming.
Mhm.
And we need numbers. Ultimately it comes to numbers. My dream is to have 100,000 people in recovery on the National Mall sometime.
Ooh,
Um,
we were close
that
to
it
that back in 2015 when we did,
was a
facing
it was
addiction. Were
it was
you
about
there?
6 no, it was about 16,000 though. It was quite a ways from
I think more
from
like
100,000.
I'm gonna say
Was it?
yeah,
Okay,
that's
because
fair.
16.5 is what I had always heard,
Yeah, yeah. There was
um,
definitely a lot
but
of folks.
but then the other thing in Virginia, for example, we were talking about this a few weeks ago. Whenever any gun stuff comes up, the gun lobby turns out 21,000 people on Capitol Square at the beginning of the legislative session every year. I want to turn out one more person than they do, or two more people than they do.
Yeah, if we can
Uh,
just reach one person a day, a month, just reach one person. That again,
yep.
that kinda goes with back to our our earlier roots in recovery. It only took 2 people to make a meeting, right? So if I can keep connecting with someone somewhere, I work for a crisis call center. I'm always connecting
Yep.
with people that I don't see. I don't know unless I get their call back or do a follow-up call. I don't know what they took, what I was able to provide to them in resources and referrals and things like that, or even just sometimes I drop in a little bit of my story.
That was the one
But I
thing I
know
missed.
that there's a connection there, right?
Yeah.
And it goes back to Reiki, right? It's about
Yeah.
bringing that vibration and that energy, and we continue to do that. We share love, with that
Yep.
unconditional love, and we share love with others. So it can be that ripple effect.
And it's probably the single biggest thing I missed working in the hospital was that once somebody left, unless they came back, I had no idea how they were doing. And I wished I did. I only found out how they were doing if they weren't doing well.
Yeah,
And so and that I missed
yeah.
because nothing what is it? Nothing begets
Nothing.
success like success or something like
Oh, okay.
that, or
I thought you were gonna
you
say
know
nothing about us without us.
oh, well, that too. That
That too,
too.
right? So, again, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you,
Thank you,
thank
my dear.
you. This is
I will
thing. Hold on, we're not done yet. I gotta do my
okay.
closing, so don't shut me off yet.
I
Don't
won't.
don't hit
I
that
won't.
end button, although we were in and out trying to practice, and get ourselves ready for today. There was so much that we shared. We shared about, our recovery, shared about politics, shared about Pride Month, and I hope that, those that are listening or going to hear this, podcast will gather something in reflection. So I got a couple of reflection questions. It will be in the show notes for folks. But what have you discovered about yourself in this season of your life? And also, what does Pride Month personally mean to you? You may not be a person that identifies in any sort of way, but again, what does it mean to you? Pride can be all things, right? It's not just necessarily about how we identify, it can be in all things. And what gives you hope for the future in whatever recovery or whatever space of healing that you're looking for? I am working on some other projects to bring into a workshop and a workbook. And I look at that sense of awareness. Where are we aware? Where do we need to reset instead of self care? Right? Where is it that we need to use those tools? Maybe we need to build some new tools in our toolbox. So check on your tools. If they're a little rusty, maybe you need to get out there and get yourself a new therapist or get involved with a new group. Get outside yourself and get outside, period. We just got done with a blue moon in Sagittarius, and it's all about change, it's all about transformation, it's all about letting go. So those are the things that I want folks to maybe just reflect and journal about, whatever you need to do, but just keep showing up, keep healing. Again, Tom, thank you so much for being with us today. And for the next time, we'll see you next week. This will probably be a two-part. So, but next time, keep working on it. Keep working on you,
Ha
showing up, and keep rising and keep cruising on the edge. Thank you so
and
much,
ha
everyone.
happy Pride,
Happy
everybody.
Pride.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.